Let me tell you about a phrase that appeared in financial markets this year. A phrase that reveals everything. Trump always chickens out. This is not an insult. This is not a criticism. This is the market's acknowledgement of how the system actually works. And it is beautiful. It is perfect. In April 2025, Donald Trump announced what he called reciprocal tariffs. Tariffs on almost every country. A universal 10% baseline plus country-specific additions. China, 145%. 145% tariffs on Chinese goods. This was presented as the most aggressive trade policy in a century. The restoration of American economic sovereignty, the end of globalization as we know it, and what happened? The stock market crashed. Not a small correction, a crash. Investors panicked. Business leaders expressed concern. CEOs warned of price increases and product shortages within 2 weeks. And then Trump backed down. Not officially, you understand, not explicitly, but the threats were delayed. The negotiations began. The reciprocal tariffs were adjusted. China got a 90-day temporary deal. Most countries saw their rates lowered. The universal tariff remained on paper, but enforcement became flexible. By June, markets had recovered. The S&P 500 hit a new all-time high on June 27th. Analysts wrote articles with titles like "Why Trump's Threats Have Lost Credibility." And somewhere in this process, someone coined the phrase, "Trump always chickens out," not as complaint, as observation, as market wisdom, as the cynical acknowledgement that the threat is the policy and the policy is never the threat. Now, you might say, but Žižek, this shows weakness. This shows that Trump cannot follow through. This shows that markets constrain political power. No, no, no. This is not weakness. This is not failure. This is the system functioning exactly as designed. Let me be very precise here, very clear, because this is where ideology does its most elegant work. Trump's tariffs raised $250 billion in revenue for the federal government in 2025. $250 billion. That is 25 times more than 2024, when the government collected about $10 billion per month in tariff revenue. So tariffs were imposed, money was collected, the government benefited financially, but structurally nothing changed. Trade relationships continued, supply chains adapted but did not break. Chinese goods still entered America, just with higher costs passed to consumers. The global system absorbed the disruption and continued. This is what I mean when I say the threat is the policy. Trump does not need to enforce 145% tariffs on China. He just needs to threaten them. The threat creates uncertainty. Uncertainty creates leverage. Leverage creates negotiation. Negotiation creates the appearance of toughness without the cost of actual confrontation. And everyone knows this. The markets know. The CEOs know. The foreign governments know. Even Trump's own advisors know. Peter Navarro, the tariff hardliner, the one who believed tariffs should actually be enforced, he was sidelined, pushed aside, replaced by Scott Bessent, a former hedge fund manager who understands that threats are more valuable than actions, because actions have consequences, but threats are pure performance. You can threaten 145% tariffs without suffering the economic damage of 145% tariffs. You can look tough without being tough. You can claim victory without winning anything. And the beautiful part, the absolutely beautiful part, is that the market has learned this. The market knows Trump will back down. And knowing this, the market profits. After the initial crash in April, investors who understood the pattern bought the dip. They knew Trump would retreat. They knew the threats were performance, and they were right. By June, markets had fully recovered. By November, The average tariff rate had dropped from 27% to 16.8%, still higher than 2024, but nowhere near the threatened levels. Trump always chickens out became market wisdom, not a criticism, but a trading strategy. And this is the genius. This is the obscene beauty of how capitalism functions. The system has learned to survive threats by making threats meaningless, not by eliminating them, but by integrating them, by making the threat itself the mechanism through which the system continues. Pitvar, bitva, tridgye, pitva, pitva. Think about what this means. Think about the implications. In the old days, political threats had to be credible. If you threatened war, you had to be willing to wage war. If you threatened sanctions, you had to be willing to enforce sanctions. If you threatened tariffs, you had to be willing to accept the economic consequences. But now the threat is the policy. The performance is the substance. You do not need to actually disrupt trade. You just need to create the appearance of disrupting trade. You do not need to actually confront China. You just need to look like you are confronting China. And as long as everyone understands this is performance, the performance works. Trump collected $250 billion. He looked tough. His supporters believed he was fighting for America. His critics confirmed he was dangerous. The media covered it extensively. Everyone played their role. And at the end, trade continued. Markets recovered. China adapted. Nothing fundamentally changed. This is not weakness. This is flexibility. This is capitalism's ultimate ideological achievement, the ability to survive even the threats meant to destroy it. You want protectionism? Fine. We will give you protectionism, but protectionism that does not actually protect. Tariffs that do not actually restrict, threats that do not actually threaten, because the moment you actually enforce the threat, the moment you actually impose 145% tariffs and refuse to negotiate, the moment you actually disrupt the system fights back. The markets crash, business leaders revolt. Your own advisors undermine you. So the only way to survive as a political leader is to make threats you do not intend to keep, to perform toughness without being tough, to look like you are changing everything while changing nothing. And Trump, whether consciously or instinctively, understands this perfectly. He threatens, markets panic, he backs down, markets celebrate, he claims victory. Supporters believe him, critics attack him, and the cycle repeats. Trump always chickens out is not a bug, it is the feature. Now let me give you the details, the specifics, the data that proves this is not accident, but structure. In April 2025, when Trump announced the universal 10% tariff plus country-specific additions, 84% of business leaders expressed concern about economic impact. 84% CEOs of major retailers warned that price increases would be visible within 2 weeks. Supply chain experts predicted shortages. Economists calculated that the tariffs would cost the average American family thousands of dollars per year. And Trump's response? He claimed the pain would be worth it, that America needed to suffer temporarily to restore economic sovereignty. Pripelta bil derava bia parava. Sovereignty to America bidiar piso tveridiki, to restore economic sovereignty, trodiskebrama fititidi, to restore economic sovereignty to Christ, trodistoderit, they are the diperama fititit, if repodititit, they are the diperama fititit, 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 they are the... This sounds like commitment, yes? This sounds like a leader willing to accept costs for principles. But then the first cargo ships carrying Chinese goods at 145% tariff rates arrived in May. And you know what happened? Shipments were cut in half, costs were passed to consumers, retailers screamed, and suddenly Trump pivoted. Suddenly negotiations became priority. Suddenly Scott Bessent, the former hedge fund manager who understands market psychology, became the lead economic advisor. And Peter Navarro, the true believer in tariffs, was sidelined. By June, Trump had signed exactly one permanent deal with the United Kingdom. One. After threatening the entire world, one deal. China got a 90-day temporary extension, Canada and Mexico got exemptions, Europe got nothing official, but enforcement became flexible. Most country-specific tariffs were quietly reduced or postponed. And markets celebrated. Because markets understand Trump always chickens out. This phrase appeared in financial analysis, in hedge fund reports, in trader communications, not as mockery, but as strategy. Wait for Trump to threaten. Wait for markets to panic. Buy the dip. Wait for Trump to back down. Sell at recovery. Repeat. And this worked. This actually worked as a trading strategy because the pattern was reliable, because everyone knew Trump would retreat. Now, the question is, does Trump know this? Does he understand that his threats are performance? I think yes and no. Pure performance. He does not think, I will threaten but not enforce. He thinks, I will threaten and see what happens. And what happens is that reality pushes back. Markets crash, advisors panic, business leaders revolt, and Trump, being fundamentally pragmatic despite his rhetoric, adjusts. He does not see this as backing down. He sees it as negotiation, as flexibility, as smart deal-making. And you know what? He is right. This is smart. This is how power works now. Pure ideology would be to enforce 145% tariffs regardless of consequence. Pure principle would be to accept market crashes as necessary pain. But Trump is not ideological. Trump is cynical. And cynicism is more effective than ideological. Because cynicism understands that appearance matters more than reality, that performance matters more than substance, that looking tough is more valuable than being tough. And the system, the market, the economy, the global trade structure, the system has learned to work with this, to profit from this, to depend on this. Think about what would happen if Trump actually followed through. If he actually imposed and maintained 145% tariff on China, if he actually disrupted global trade completely, the economy would crash, not temporarily, but structurally. Supply chains would break, prices would explode, shortages would materialize, inflation would spiral, and within months, Trump would face revolt, not from Democrats, from his own party, from business leaders, from voters experiencing actual economic pain. So the only sustainable approach is threats without follow-through, performance without substance, the appearance of disruption without actual disruption. And everyone benefits. Trump gets to look tough. His supporters feel represented. Business leaders get leverage in negotiations. Markets get volatility to profit from. Media gets stories to cover. The only ones who do not benefit, the ones who believed the threats were real, the ones who thought Trump actually intended to restructure global trade, Balkan. But those people, those naive believers, they are not the target audience. The target audience is the cynical majority who understand that politics is performance and performance is enough. Trump always chickens out is not disappointment. It is confirmation. Confirmation that the system works as expected. That threats are tools, not commitments. That flexibility is strength, not weakness. And here is the deepest ideological operation. Here is where it gets really obscene. The phrase "Trump always chickens out" makes Trump's retreats sound like personal failure, like individual weakness, like character flaw. But this is wrong. This is missing the structure. Trump retreats because the system forces retreat. Not through explicit constraint, but through implicit pressure. Markets crash, advisors warn, business leaders threaten, and Trump, reading these signals, adjusts. This is not weakness. This is the system regulating itself through distributed pressure rather than centralized control. No one explicitly tells Trump back down or else. But the combined weight of market reactions, advisor concerns, business warnings, media coverage, this creates a gravitational field that pulls Trump toward retreat. And Trump, being fundamentally responsive to power signals, responds. Not because he is weak, but because he is rational. Because he understands that pure ideology is political suicide. So when we say Trump always chickens out, we are attributing to individual psychology what is actually systemic structure. Trump does not chicken out. The system makes backing down the only viable option, and then presents the systemic constraint as individual choice. Trump could have followed through, but he chose not to. No, the system made following through impossible and then blamed Trump for recognizing impossibility. Impossible. This is ideology at its purest. This is how power disguises itself. The system constrains action through distributed pressure, then attributes the constraint to individual weakness, then celebrates when individuals realize they must compromise. And throughout this entire process, the system never appears as constraint. It appears as reality, as what works, as pragmatism. Trump threatens 145% tariffs. Reality forces him to back down. Analysts celebrate his pragmatism. Markets reward his flexibility. And the structure that created this entire dynamic remains invisible. Trump always chickens out becomes common sense, becomes market wisdom, becomes truth. But the truth is not that Trump chickens out. The truth is that the system has learned to survive threats by making threats meaningless, by absorbing them, by making retreat inevitable while presenting it as choice. And Trump, whether he knows it or not, is the perfect vehicle for this. Because Trump is pure performance, pure flexibility, pure responsiveness to power signals. He has no ideology to constrain him, no principles to limit him, no commitments to honor. He simply performs and adjusts and performs again. And this makes him perfect for a system that requires flexibility, that requires threats without enforcement, that requires disruption without change. The old politicians, the ones with ideology, with principles, with commitments, they were problems because they might actually try to follow through. They might actually disrupt the system. But Trump always chickens out, and this is not failure. This is why the system tolerates him, why markets eventually recover, why trade continues despite the threats. Because everyone knows, everyone has learned that Trump's threats are performance, that the disruption is temporary, that things will return to normal once Trump has gotten enough attention, enough coverage, enough appearance of toughness, and normal is what the system wants. Not actual change, not structural disruption, just enough performance to satisfy political needs while ensuring nothing fundamentally changes. This is the obscene beauty of contemporary capitalism, the obscene efficiency of contemporary power. You do not need to suppress threats. You just need to make them meaningless. You do not need to silence opposition. You just need to make opposition theater. And Trump, the ultimate performer, has become the perfect expression of this logic. So when financial analysts write, Trump always chickens out, when this becomes market wisdom, when investors build trading strategies around this pattern, they are not criticizing Trump, they are thanking him for being predictable, for being flexible, for being exactly what the system needs, a leader who threatens everything and changes nothing. And Trump himself, he celebrates because he collected $250 billion, because he looked tough, because his supporters believe he fought for them. Everyone wins, except the ones who believed the threats were real, except the ones who thought politics could actually disrupt the system, except the ones who imagined that power could be challenged through performance. But those people, those naive believers, they are learning. They are learning what the markets already know. They are learning what the system has always known. Trump always chickens out, not because he is weak, but because backing down is how the system survives. And survival is what matters. Not principles, not ideology, not change, just survival. The system's survival. Through flexibility, through absorption, through making every threat meaningless. This is not failure, this is function. And Trump is functioning perfectly